Hello and welcome to the Minds on the Frontline Podcast, brought to you by the Frontline Strong Together 5 program. FST5 provides streamlined access to behavioral and mental health services, as well as crisis resources for Michigan's Frontline 5 workers and their families. This includes all professional, part-time, and volunteer firefighters, EMS, law enforcement, corrections officers, and 911 dispatchers in Michigan and their immediate family members. FST5 was collaboratively created by first responders and mental health experts to provide 24/7 live support, effective resources, and cutting-edge services to prevent and alleviate PTSD, anxiety, depression, and other frontline work-related mental and behavioral health challenges. Need help now? If you are a frontline worker in Michigan or an immediate family member experiencing any crisis, work-related, substance abuse, depression, relationships, finances, or any other, reach out by calling 1-833-34-STRONG or go to fst5.org for more information. I'm Jeff Lassers, one of the hosts of the Minds on the Frontline podcasts, and I'm a professional firefighter, paramedic, educator, and content creator. Minds on the Front Line is co-hosted by Mike Mattern, who is also a professional firefighter and paramedic. In addition, Mike is a peer support team member for his fire department and the Frontline Strong Together 5 program, as well as the chair of the Michigan Professional Firefighters Union Behavioral Health Committee and a board member of the Michigan Crisis Response Association. Mike has training and experience with frontline worker mental and behavioral health. On the other hand, I do not. My role is to produce the show, whereas Mike is our resident subject matter expert. Together, we hope to inform, educate, and entertain frontline workers, their families, and the public regarding the realities of frontline work-related mental and behavioral health challenges. Unfortunately, Mike was unable to join us in this episode. Sitting in for him is Manisha Leary. Manisha is the program manager of FST5 and is a clinical therapist with a focus on trauma. In this episode, we introduce you to Sheriff Jerry Clayton of the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Department, located in southeast Michigan. Washtenaw County, part of the Greater Detroit metropolitan area and home to Ann Arbor, extends over a 720 square mile area and serves a population of 358,000 residents. Sheriff Clayton, now in his fourth term, brings over 30 years of experience in public safety services. Under his leadership, the Sheriff's Department operates across 5 divisions: administrative operations, community engagement, corrections, emergency services, and police services. With a career spanning from frontline corrections officer to police services commander and SWAT team commander, Sheriff Clayton has a comprehensive background in law enforcement operations. Additionally, his extensive tenure as a certified criminal justice trainer has contributed to the development and training of law enforcement personnel at both the local and national level. In this episode, our conversation with Sheriff Clayton will focus on 3 critical aspects of frontline work. First, we'll delve into Sheriff Clayton's personal journey of recognizing the impact of mental and behavioral health issues on frontline workers. Next, we'll explore the specific strategies and initiatives that the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Department has implemented or plans to implement to promote and maintain the well-being of their staff. Lastly, Sheriff Clayton will offer his expertise on how leaders within the frontline community can effectively support the mental and behavioral health of their personnel. This was a great episode, and we really enjoyed having Sheriff Clayton on the show. Please check us out on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and make sure to like and subscribe to all Minds on the Frontline Podcast social media. Thank you, and enjoy the show. Good morning, everybody. How are you?
Good morning.
Well, welcome. Sheriff Clayton, tell everybody who you are, what you do, and where you do it.
Well, my name is Jerry Clayton. I have the honor of serving as the Sheriff of Washtenaw County, which the seat is Ann Arbor. I've been in that office for 15 years, my fourth and final term. Who am I? Married, father of 3, been in the profession for 35 years, all with the Sheriff's Office with a little break in between. And I started as actually a part-time community work program, also people that are sentenced to community work, sort of monitoring and managing that while I was at college, while I was in Eastern. I played football at Eastern. And so I did that with really no intent on staying. I was like this communications major, and it was never in my head, although my dad said at one point that I'd said when I was younger I wanted to be a police officer. I don't remember that. So, I did that for a while, got finished school, and was offered a full-time job in corrections. I said, I'll do that for a minute. And I think if you talk to especially old-time sheriff's office folks, they have that same story. I'm just going to do this for a minute. and then a minute turns into a few years. And at that time, the retirement was so short, 20 years. I got to like year 4 or 5. I'm like, yeah, maybe I'll stay. And I'm the kind of person that if I'm going to do something, I want to do it right. So I stayed and then just tested for everything. So I tested and I went to the road. So I was in road patrol, and I tested for a road patrol deputy and sergeant in corrections at the same time. So I went to the road, got certified. I was in the PTO, got out of that. And then a sergeant's position in corrections opened up. So I just jumped at it and went back into corrections, which really doesn't happen much in the profession where you leave road patrol and go back into corrections. But there really was something in corrections that I sort of got this sense that if you did that part right, you actually can change community more to some degree than you can if you're on the road, right? So I went back, long story short, and my career just kept going. Lieutenant and then commander, and under Sheriff Ron Scheibo, I became corrections commander and then the police services commander, and I did SWAT for fun, I guess, and all of that.
For fun.
Yeah. And I did all of that, and then I retired. It's a different sheriff. It was time for me to go. And I'd been doing some work for the Justice Department, most of it in corrections, but some of it around consent decrees. And I want to sort of plant that seed around consent decrees and MOAs. And, we see that across the country. We're trying to reform and change police departments.
What does that mean? Give everybody a
So
little
a consent decree is really what happens if the Justice Department or a state like civil rights organization alleges that an agency or a city or a county is engaged in a pattern of practices of discriminatory behavior that is violating people's constitutional rights, and then an investigation ensues. And so we'll just say with the federal DOJ determines that they have a case, then they take it to court. So they sue that county, they sue that agency, and in front of a judge. And if the evidence is that there is a pattern and practice of discriminatory behavior that has a disparate impact on a particular group, then the judge issues an order that's called a consent decree that lays out a series of reforms, whether it's policy, training, and all of that. Then they hire a monitor, an outside person, usually an attorney, who brings in a team, and they monitor compliance. The reason why I think that's important is because I think in a lot of these, we're still missing the point. And as we get further in our conversation, the theme you'll hear from me a lot is organizational culture. So what happens is they change policy, they change training, but they're not intentional about changing organizational culture, and they still wonder why those behaviors don't change and the impact doesn't change. So even as we start to talk about, investment in the mental health or wellness for our staff, the big piece is, are we changing the culture that creates space for folks to accept what you're trying to help them with, where that wellness and all that actually takes hold, if any of that makes sense. So last thing I'll say in terms of who I am, and then I'm a small business owner. So I own a business that does a lot of work in the area of organizational leadership and development, and we have a number of different clients. And that is what I'll transition to when I leave the end of next year.
Right on. So yeah,
Awesome.
you're too young to go to Florida.
Yes, I am too. I love the thought of golfing, but yeah, I think I'm a little too young to do that every day.
Yeah, Michigan retiree, Tampa. That's what I think, but no.
It's so funny because we looked at Tampa.
I know you did because you're from Michigan. You're retired.
That's exactly right.
Gotcha.
Well, that's an amazing background. So obviously you're here to talk more about the mental and behavioral health of frontline workers. So throughout your career, from somebody who didn't even know they were really interested in law enforcement to then basically doing everything in corrections and law enforcement you can imagine, when and how did you realize that behavioral and mental health issues are real life concerns for all frontline workers? We're talking fire, EMS, law enforcement, corrections, dispatch, all of them.
Yeah. I wish I could say I had that epiphany early.
Right.
I did not.
Right. Well, you said you were young. You were 21.
I was 21.
Your brain's not even fully done cooking until about 25.
Some would argue at 59, mine is not.
I feel you.
Not finished, right? There's still, this is a guy's not done with me yet. There's still some cooking. Put Jerry back in that oven. Let things bake. So no, I didn't. And let's go back to the culture. Mm-hmm. The organizational culture back then was suck it up.
Yeah.
Do the job. Don't whine. It's weakness if you acknowledge that you're struggling. And we saw the manifestation of that, both in our agency and through the profession. Mm-hmm. Suicides, alcoholism, divorce. I mean, there's a reason why in this profession, the rates are exponentially higher in all those categories for first responders, police professionals, correction professionals than the normal population. It's because the culture doesn't allow that. I mean, I think it damages careers if you mention that. And some of it's sort of weird because I remember being in rooms and hearing people talk about this, where there's a litigation aspect of it. There's a risk management. You mean you telling me you're struggling and I put you back out there to do the work? Now you make a mistake. They're going to use that against us. They're going to sue us. And so I can't promote you to this or to that. So as opposed to us helping folks navigate that, helping them get well so they can promote and do all that work, we would rather ignore it. That's what we did. And I'll tell you, for a long period of time, I was part of that profession that I didn't advocate it. I wasn't smart enough to know what
it's very easy to go along with the crowd when you're a young person coming up through a paramilitary organization. It's like everything they tell you is putting gasoline in your squad car. You do it exactly like this. So you just kind of go along with everything, right? Right.
And then you get promoted. And then the person that's teaching you, so it's all the same thing.
Yeah.
So, and even today, over there watching us now is Dr. Kim Jones, right? She's our Director of Innovative Inclusion.
Shout out
to Dr. Jones.
Kim.
And part of what she's doing is helping us wrap our minds around it. Here's one thing I did know, even to today, I don't have all those answers. Right? If it's up to me or the team that we had at the time to figure it out, we're going to continue to fail. So you bring somebody in like Dr. Jones, not only with outside perspective to the profession and the organization, but really creative in how you not only bring people in from an inclusion standpoint, but the people that are there, help them navigate their own issues. And so it took, quite frankly, an incident that really caused us to do a behavioral health training to also give me some insight in terms of staff wellness, where our staff responded to a call for service of a guy who was a domestic assault, mom and sister. Our staff respond. It's all on body cam. This guy's in behavioral health, mental health distress. He's got a knife going back and forth. Anyway, our staff brought him under control. Nobody got hurt. And two things jumped out at me. Our staff was able to do it because they believe in, at the end of the day, success is when everybody is safe, not just themselves. But we were failing from an administrative standpoint because we weren't providing them the right kind of mental health training to engage. And then we weren't providing them the support from a wellness standpoint because that's trauma for them, right? That's a life every day. They have these little micro traumas. And then we had a situation where a deputy responded to a call for service of a baby that drowned. He goes into the pool, brings the baby out, tries to save the baby, was unsuccessful. Writes the report, changes clothes, goes right back to work. And we, as an organization, we might send them to a critical incident stress management as a group, but we as an organization didn't have the kind of services to wrap around for that person to make sure they're okay moving forward. That's a failure on our part.
Right. It's not like you're like, well, we'll get to it. No, like you kind of probably didn't know what to do.
Right.
What's the protocol for that?
Right.
And that's the point.
Right.
What is the protocol?
What is the protocol? So, our response, we have EAP. Come on now.
Yeah, that's the three letters aren't going to save.
Right?
Yeah, no.
Right.
That's not 911.
Right. That's not gonna do it. The other part I think that's really important is what kind of culture are we creating in the sheriff's office where we make it really okay? Not only okay, we're encouraging you to express when you don't feel that you're your whole self. So whether it's mental, emotional, whatever it is, physical, if you're not your whole self, it's okay for you to tell us that.
Yeah.
And you won't be penalized for it. Matter of fact, we're going to help you and support you in any way you need, not the way we think it should happen. So we're trying to figure that out. I would be lying to you if I said we figured it out. We have not figured it out yet, but we're moving in that direction.
Yeah, it seems like there's a million different circumstances that are going to present themselves. So you saying you're going to support them, it's not what I'm going to need from you. It might be my sick kid. Manisha might be she's sick. So it's different things that are going to be affecting the different types of people. You can't have this, we say wrap around, but
right.
What we're saying is I think we're going to be much more sensitive to providing services and being open to what they need rather than telling them what they need.
That's exactly right.
Absolutely.
That's exactly right.
You mentioned before that it was a process of changing the culture in the department, and you've been trying to do that since you've got there. Has there been a pushback of trying to integrate the idea of being mentally well for your department?
No, I don't think, not an overt pushback.
Okay.
Right. But those of us that operate in the the leading change arena know that actually it is the covert resistance that is far more dangerous than the overt. So if you stand up and say, no, I'm not doing that, I can address that. But is there passive aggressive, or is there just not a willingness to engage?
There's a lot of this.
Right.
I could smile and nod at you all day. Hey, boss is here. Pretend like we're doing the thing. Come on.
That's right. So quite frankly, some of the things that we're doing is trying to have the staff be a part of the creation of that. So the difference. If we decide we're going to do it, first off, people see the world from the seat that they sit in. So I see it from an administrative leadership perspective. I can try to be sensitive and remember what it was. Remember, we have this saying, remember what you were when, right? So I can try to remember what it was when I was a CEO or a deputy. It's just not the same. Folks like Dr. Jones now engaging the staff and working with them collaboratively to figure out, okay, what does a staff wellness look like in Washtenaw County Sheriff's Office?
That's the ticket. In Washtenaw County Sheriff's Office.
That's right.
You can't bring any doctor and say, well, it worked here. We're just go put it in Cincinnati.
That's right.
It ain't gonna happen.
That's exactly right. So that's part of what Kim is doing. Honestly, when I asked her to join, I don't know if I had that necessarily in mind.
Gotcha.
But she has the bigger picture that all of this is. So when you're talking about inclusion and equity and all that, wellness is a key part of that. And I'll be honest, I didn't think about it that way, but she has. So she's trying to help us navigate that. And I think my job is to not only support it, but to be clear in the organization that this is who we are. Because organizational culture is about an expression of values and beliefs. So one of our beliefs is you are the most valuable part of the sheriff's office. It's not the building, not the cars, not any of the other stuff. It's the people. So that's a belief that should drive a value of taking care of our staff. And that value should manifest itself in some of the work that we're doing and some of the work that Dr. Jones is leading.
Awesome. That's amazing. I actually had the opportunity to do a walkthrough through the jail last time I was there. It's impressive to hear you say this because your deputy was saying that that's the culture, not only that you guys are creating within the department and for the COs in the department, is also something that you guys try to practice with the inmates in the jail. And so how has that process worked?
So that's a great pickup, right? So you can have an organizational culture, and then within each division is an operational philosophy. So police, so when folks say, well, we're community policing, that's really an operational philosophy that is, there's some principles, some key principles and guidelines and usually some values so if we value community policing in the sense that we work collectively with community and we focus on solutions, long-term solutions, not immediate, and we understand that law enforcement is one tool, community building is another, blah, blah, blah. In corrections, it's called strategic inmate management, which essentially is based on this belief that the majority of the people in your jail that are incarcerated will act like what we call situational normal adults, which means the situation is you're in jail. In the traditional sense, we have always built jails that, somebody goes to jail, they're going to lose their mind, they're going to tear stuff up, they're going to hurt people, blah, blah, blah. This is the same person that maybe just for this mistake, the majority of them, drunk driving, whatever it was, actually follow societal rules. So our belief is if you put the rules in place, provide the resources for them to do it, blah, 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 blah. And safety and security in the facility and for everybody else is achieved by how effectively you manage the behavior. So our staff are managers of people's behavior, which means I must take a different tack. So it's not a physical way that I manage your behavior. I engage you in a way to make sure I know what you need. I help you meet those basic needs. And then I help you prepare yourself for when you go back out. So our staff sees themselves in that role. That's a different way of thinking about how you do that job. When I started doing the job, people asked me what I did in the jail. I said, I give grown men toilet paper and tell them when to eat and go to bed. That's what I thought. Now I would hope my staff would say, yeah, I manage people's behavior, keeping the facility safe and the people safe, and help people successfully reenter the community to be productive employees. So think about it like that. If that's my mindset versus we fight every day, which is what it was when I started, think about my mental health.
Yeah. Both ways.
Both ways.
Yeah. That's got it. So let me ask you that. So it's a little bit more obvious what a law enforcement officer in the road's going to go through what they're dealing with. They see calls. They deal with human beings every day that may or may not be nice to them. Their interactions may not always be positive. Sometimes they are. Sure. A lot of times they're positive, but sometimes they're not. But this is with everyday citizens. You have a completely different interaction within the walls of a corrections facility. So obviously there's a difference there. So tell us compare and contrast what that corrections officer goes through versus the law enforcement officer.
One of the biggest differences is, so as a police officer, so you respond to calls for service, right? They call in the dispatch sends you to a call, you're responding to call for service, you're assessing situations, you're rendering aid, maybe you're enforcing the law because somebody's violating a law, something like that. And when you're done with that call, you have a chance to disengage, right? You can do some proactive work if you want to. There's probably some follow-up you can do, all of those things. Correction officer, if you're in charge of a housing unit, right, maybe 32, 40, 64 incarcerated individuals, and you're inside, in our facility, we're short-staffed now, so it's made it a little different, but with strategic inmate management, you're inside the housing unit with them. So that entire shift, you're inside. And you are the provider of all of their needs, meals, medical care, information outside, facilitating visits, all of that. It's hard to get away from that. So think about the stress of trying to manage a unit for 8 or 16 hours with 30 to 64 people where you are their connection to the outside and all the services they need to meet their basic needs. Oh, yeah, and by the way, you have your own responsibilities to make sure the place is secure, it's clean, all those things. So there's a different kind of stress, right? And you're responsible for the care of folks that oftentimes, all of them, they don't want to be there. Yeah. So the police officer has the responsibility of, and I tell them this all the time, your stressor is the power that comes with the authority that you have the ability to impact what we value most in this country. That's people's freedom and their lives. That's a stressor that is always over them. For a correction officer, the stressor is now that they've been incarcerated, the majority of our people are pretrial, which means they're innocent until proven guilty. That's a tenet of our country. You must do your job in a way that doesn't violate their constitutional rights. They have not been convicted of anything. And oh yeah, by the way, even if they've been convicted, you are not judge and jury. That is not your role. Your role is to care for folks that sometimes don't want to be cared for. So it's just different kinds of stressors, but I think they're equally high stressors.
Yeah, that seems two different jobs.
Yes.
Just because you interact with the same people, that's like saying my job's the same because I'm also a paramedic. I see people.
Right.
They have complaints. Right. Different than the complaints you have.
Right.
That's interesting.
The complexity of being able to, because you said you were understaffed, which most of our departments in the state of Michigan is, all 83 counties are struggling with kind of the same short staff. I almost want to say kind of the epidemic right now. Like it's hard to get people to come into the space of wanting to be a first responder, knowing and kind of seeing for themselves of what our first responders are dealing with every day. How do you, I don't even know if it's keeping, but how do we talk with the corrections officers about not taking that mentality in that space of being in that unit for 12, 16, 18 hours home with them? How do they separate? Because again, just like you said, on the road, you can kind of have that situation, you can have that call, come and do your report, and you kind of decompress. And that could be what you deal with for the rest of the day.
Right. Yeah, my worst day, you've been in firehouses. Yeah. We have a bad day, we go back and have a food fight or do something dumb,
Exactly. Yeah.
You can't really do that.
Right.
There.
In corrections, the mentality is different.
Right. For all in the organization, right? For the deputies on the road, for the correction officers in the correctional facility, for the dispatchers in our emergency communication dispatcher, which again has its own set of stressors. Mm-hmm. I mean, the stressors, the level of stress, if you're a dispatcher or call taker, I think may exceed the other two to some degree. Because they are, we talk about dispatches, like think about the central nervous system in the body, mm-hmm. that it's receiving all the information and then it sends out and it facilitates the body's response. That's what central dispatch is. They're receiving all that emergency information and then they're trying to send the right first responder to the right place at the right time, to depending on what they're responsible for in terms of dispatching. And for those individuals, they rarely know the outcome of what they sent. So they don't get closure. Mm-hmm. They don't get the final chapter of the book. There's stressors in that. How do we think about, what are we doing to help them not take that home? Mm-hmm. I will say, and I've said this, I'll be honest, I think we're failing in that. I think it's part of the larger architecture for us in terms of how we do the wellness. We say, I think some people think you can separate those two. You can't, because you're the same person. What we do is we encourage them to, when people ask me who I am, I very rarely, if ever, lead with I'm Jerry Clayton, Sheriff of Washtenaw County. That's what I do. So even for dispatchers and police officers and correctional officers, that's not who you are. That's what you do. I'm fully invested in the job. Love it. But that's not who I am. And what we try to encourage staff is be invested. Be one with the mission and everything else. But you got to have outside interests. And oh, yeah, by the way, you should have outside people. I mean, you've been doing this for a long time, right? We would surround ourselves with only folks that are like us, because that's only people we trust, and we can talk. So how are you disconnecting from the work if you go and have a beer or a Coke or whatever it is, and you're talking about the same thing? So diversify your interests. Do all those other things that bring you joy. I'm a big plan your future for when you leave. So if I know I'm going to do this for 25 years and I got 20 more years of work life after I leave, part of what I should be doing while I'm working is planning my future, whatever that different career is.
It might even be a career. It might be like you just going to ride your bike every day.
There you go.
Plan it.
Whatever it
Get
is.
in shape for that retirement.
And start practicing it before you get here, right?
Yeah.
So diversify. Whatever, as strong as your commitment is to the work, have a strong commitment to something outside of the work. Mm-hmm. And immerse yourself in that. I think it's an easier message with this generation than it was with my generation.
Yeah, the younger generation, I think, latches on the fact they want to do something. They want to feel a part of something. They want to do something cool.
Yeah.
But they don't want it to own them.
No.
And a lot of times I think they get a bad rap for us going, well, you don't know. They're not, zealots about it.
No.
They're just like, no, man, it's time to go.
No, it is. So as an administrator, it sort of drives me crazy, right? And they will pack up and leave and go do something else in a heartbeat, which I think to some degree is healthy, but organizationally, it's the biggest challenge. If you had asked me 15 years ago what the biggest challenge would have been, I would not have said hiring people.
Right. You came in when there was a lot of people in front of you, probably even applying, right?
Yes.
I tested against hundreds of people multiple times to get a job, and now it's like, you're almost done with school. We'll take you. That's
right. Just think about the national narrative, especially around policing and sheriff's offices and everything like that. The reckoning finally came. I mean, the message is, and I'm a student of police, the history of policing, 400 years, right? Northern policing, Southern policing. And we've put together this timeline. We look at the history of policing and we look at the African-American experience. And there's a direct connection to that all the way around. And at some point, you can only ignore the impact of that fractured relationship for so long before it just all explodes. So it's exploded. So this national narrative, this anti-police narrative, which I think, quite frankly, is damaging to, and as an African-American man, let me start by just saying this. I tell people I view my job through two lenses. My complete dedication to the work and the fact that I've been black on this planet for 59 years. You can't separate those two. So it influences how I think about policy. It influences the values that we have. And my point is this. I've always advocated that our profession needs to be more accountable for what we do and how we do it. Politicians should be accountable because they use police as the tool to discriminate against African Americans and others. They use them as the tool. But we should also recognize the fact that our society is what it is because we've all agreed to abide by a set of societal rules. And there will always be some group that's identified to enforce that. So for all the abolitionists, for all the people that say we want to get rid of the police, well, that's fine. That's fine. So you don't have to call them the police, but there will always be, and there has always been, some group of individuals that have been identified as the folks that are going to help us stay within the societal bounds. Now, I think the difference here now is we should do it more in partnership. We should have always done it more, that there's a role for community in all of that, a real role, a legitimate role. And I think we need to circle back to that. I think I got to this point just to say this time in history right now is so stressful on so many ways, right? Society, media messaging, we just can't get away from it. Social media. So it's not even, I think for some of our staff, it's not even the work that's stressing them out.
Yeah.
Right? It's media.
We talk about that all the time. Sometimes work's the easy place to go.
It is.
It's scheduled. Right. I know what to wear. I have every expectation. I don't have to think too much. I mean, once you don't say you don't think, you can become a robot when it comes to
many things. Yeah,
on the job. So yeah, it's a savior to many people. It's a place to avoid.
It is. So think about it. I leave work, and then if I'm not now, I'm watching the news. Whatever news you choose, or I'm listening to. It's just there's nowhere to go. Mm-hmm. I think now more than at any other time in our history, it is incumbent upon us to pay attention to staff wellness. And let me rephrase that. That's not right. To invest in staff wellness, to make it a priority. We've been paying attention to it for decades. We've been giving lip service to it for decades. I will admit I've been guilty of that. Now it is time for us to seriously invest.
What does that look like for your 400 plus frontline workers in Washtenaw County Sheriff's Department?
It looks like us hiring someone like Dr. Jones.
Bringing in a subject matter expert to help steer the wheel instead of saying that you know how to do this.
That's right.
You're bringing in somebody to go, okay, help me think through this. Because you still gotta get squad cars on the road. Right. You got to get corrections. There's still a lot going on. It's not like you can just divert. You're already busy.
That's right. Okay. That's exactly right.
Sorry to interrupt there.
No. That's right. You're exactly right. It's my responsibility and the executive team's responsibility to be very clear, unequivocal about the priority that this is. And not to send mixed messages, not to say it's important and then not invest. You know, my conversation with Dr. Jones is you put the strategy together. You tell us what you need, and then we will give you the resources to make it happen. And then the beauty of someone like Dr. Jones is she understands the value of engaging staff. So what it looks like for us is, can staff build it? Right? If they build it, they'll go to it. They'll support it. So that's what it looks like for us. It looks like for us, again, to make sure that from a cultural standpoint, it is a safe space for you to say, I'm not good right now. It's not going to kill your career, right? You're not going to be penalized by it. As a matter of fact, for those that would ostracize you for it, they're probably the ones that need to worry about it. That's what I think it should look like, or I'm hoping it is looking like, and we're moving in that direction with the sheriff's office.
And one of the things you mentioned was that you're designing something for Washtenaw County Sheriff's Department.
Right.
It's not a one-size-fits-all. But I think there's some tenets that certainly are across the board for all humans in the frontline community. So based on your experiences of what you're currently trying to accomplish there on your way out, which is probably hopefully going to be a big crescendo for you at the end. Hopefully that's a big one for you. That's a big deal. What advice do you have for other frontline leaders, chiefs, sheriffs, city managers, to help them invest in their frontline workers?
First is that commit to it, and don't be shy about how you articulate that in the organization, right? And then go outside of yourselves and outside of your organizations and identify folks that can help you figure out what that strategy is for your organization. And also start with what outcomes are you looking for? So if we did it right in Washtenaw County, what would that look like? What would the experience of staff be? Mm-hmm. So I want staff to say, if we did this right, I don't know what it is right now. What experience are you looking for? What does wellness look like for you? What does it feel like for you? How does it impact your job? And, that's what I'm hoping Dr. Jones leads us through that. And then as the bosses, to be unequivocal about it and say, this is a value in the organization. This is part of our organizational culture. And to have the courage to push back against folks that poo-poo it or they want to identify that as weakness, or, in the old ways we would do blah, blah. Yeah, well, the old ways weren't. How'd that work for us? It didn't work for us. And then invest in, and the other thing is there are some ancillary things we should be doing that helps contribute to staff wellness. How diverse is your organization from a gender standpoint, from a race and ethnicity standpoint, from an age standpoint? I think all of that matters. Mm-hmm. And then how do you not only lend voice, but lend impact to all those folks? So there's one thing to say, well, I'm going to give you voice. You can come in and you can tell me anything. But if I don't do anything with what you tell me, it doesn't mean anything. So I think all of that matters. And it's going to cost you some money. So be willing to pay the money. And the last thing I'll say is be patient. Change in organizational culture takes years to occur. So this can't be a flash in the pan. I'm going to do something for 6 months. And if I don't get the results that I want, I'm going to abandon it and go somewhere else. You got to be in for the long haul. Plan it, implement it, sustain it for years to come, and make that part of the culture of the organization moving forward.
Gotcha. That's amazing. One last question that feeds into this. So in the Frontline Strong Together program, we pride ourselves on not only focusing on the first responders, but we also focus on the family, the family connections. Just because we know a lot of first responders take things home, we offer the same services for the families of our first responders that we do for our first responders. So mentioning that, could making sure that your mission within the department be something that you speak on to the community? Because I strongly believe retention can go hand in hand with people's, their families talking about, we need to see, you could be a law enforcement officer, you can be a correction officer, you can be a firefighter, you can do all these different things. But when you kind of have a space where people are like, don't do that because I'm afraid.
Right.
Something will happen to you. Don't go there. So I guess my question is, how do we make sure that the missions inside the department also become the message to the community?
That's a great question, and I think the timing is right for us because we're getting ready to sign on with Cumulus Radio to start doing recruitment advertisements and things like that. It would be great to think about how do we message, just how do we make that part of our message? Mm-hmm. And we do have a robust community engagement division and the work that they do. I'm not sure how intentional we have been about that being part of our community engagement messaging. That's something I think we should give serious attention to. Dr. Jones working with Director Jackson to figure out what does that message look like and how do we get it out. I don't think we've been intentional enough there, but I think that's a really good idea.
Awesome. So I have to say that before I let you go, I am born and raised in Washtenaw County. So I'm a baby of Washtenaw County. And I have to say it is a pleasure to see you as our first African-American sheriff in Washtenaw County. So when you got elected, it was amazing. We've all heard about it. So how has this experience been for you of having that role? Has it been pressure? Have you had a lot on your shoulders?
Yeah, that's got to actually have a mental health check.
Check, yeah, for sure.
For those of you listening, Washtenaw County is a predominantly white community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not, it has pockets of African-American communities, and it can be very diverse in certain areas. But for the most part, it has that suburban, rural feel. Yeah. Ann Arbor,
Yeah, so I think we're somewhere under 14% African-American, maybe a total of 18% people of color overall. And it's sort of funny because I've had to acknowledge my own mental health stressors. It's been a heavy burden because I'll say it to you this way. My belief was, if I messed this up, there wouldn't be another person that looked like me would get a chance. There's not a lot of room for error here. And although Washtenaw County is progressive and all that liberal and all that stuff, I've always challenged. I'm not sure if that always holds true when it comes to race issues. Mm. And I think sometimes we get a little confused by that. So I've always felt that pressure to just do it right because I always wanted to do it right, but to do it right even more because the way I stood on the shoulders of other people, I don't want to be the person that fails and nobody can stand on my shoulders and move that. In that George Floyd time, we had been doing reform stuff before it was sexy for people to talk about reform. We had been doing it for well over a decade. We'd been leading the country in so many different ways. And then post George Floyd, there were people who were allies that turned on us. And I watched across the country, and if you look post George Floyd, many of the leaders and the chiefs and sheriffs in this profession that took the most heat were people that looked like me because they represented communities that were quote unquote progressive, that wanted all this progressive stuff. And they came after Black chiefs and Black sheriffs that had only been in office for a short period of time that was now representing historical practices over decades. And it was really frustrating to me. I'm like, well, wait a minute. We're here, we represent these organizations, but, Sheriff's Office is 200 years this year. I'm 15 of those 200 years, right? So if you I get it, you want to hold the agency to it, but don't dismiss what we have done in these 15 years because there's a national narrative that you should be against the police. So it was very discouraging to me. It was very frustrating to me. And it was one of the other reasons why I stayed, because I couldn't at that point leave And I said, I'll do one more. Maybe people will start to see clearly and be more aggressive about. I'm not worried about the national narrative. I'm talking about right here, right now, what we have control over. Look what we have done and what we're changing. So I just think we all should be role models when we're in these positions, but not pretend we're going to be perfect. I'm an imperfect person, and I'm okay with that. But I think we've done good stuff, and I'm proud of that. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, imperfect person seems redundant. You're a person.
A person, right. Well, that's true. That's true. But, sometimes I think we get in these positions and people try to hold you to this perfect standard. And I think we sometimes seduce ourselves.
Yeah.
And think we
want it to happen, right? It's not like we're showing up to these calls lying to people that we're going to do a good thing and help you or save your house, your loved one, or get the bad guy. Right. We really believe it.
That's right. That's right.
And when we fail, it sucks.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And that's its own set of challenges.
That's
there.
Right.
Well, we really appreciate your time today, sir.
I appreciate being invited. Hopefully our discussion is helpful to folks down the line.
I hope so, too.
All right.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Sheriff Clayton, for joining us on the Minds on the Frontline podcast. We hope everyone enjoyed the episode. We have more great content coming out soon. Please check us out on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and make sure to like and subscribe to all Minds on the Frontline podcast social media channels. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.